Time now to welcome in from the Detroit Sports Podcast. That's how you can find him on Twitter. Our good buddy, John Maakaron. Johnny Mac, what's going on, partner? How are you? How's life? How are things, my man?
Everything is awesome. You caught me at the best time. A few days after the draft, recovered from a wild Detroit Lions draft with trades, moving on from a running back, all the analysis and reaction to what Br0's did. It was just a wild 3 days. And now I'm just excited to see the fallout and really review everything that the Lions have done, watching film of the draft picks. It's just been great. It's a great time. Even though it's the offseason, rookie minicamp is just like 7 days away. So it's just a great time now following the Detroit Lions, especially after a draft that I felt was really positive for the Lions.
You know what? Let's start first. Your reaction to when they drafted a quarterback, a running back at number 12. I mean, a quarterback was on the board. Maybe there was a rumor if C.J. Stroud would have been there at 6, the Lions would have been interested in him. There was defensive line. A lot of fans thought that this team would work on the defensive line here at that position. They decide to trade back, and they go with running back Jahmyr Gibbs. What was your rapid reaction to that?
Yeah, look, I think Br0, if you guys pay attention to media sessions, he kind of prepped people for the potential for the Lions to draft a running back because he was asked about people's discussions about positional value. And he said, look, we just target players that fit our culture and that are good players. And he brought up the fact that he was part of a group that drafted Todd Gurley. So he set it up. He had talked about the opportunities that were out there for the Lions to draft good football players. And for me, I had basically in my research looked at Bijan Robinson. I was very impressed going all the way back in early mock drafts, far too early mock drafts back in December, looking at Bijan Robinson as a potential replacement for DeAndre Swift, because it was just shaping up to be a situation where Swift and the Lions were going to part ways. So obviously when it happened, I thought it was great that they were able to trade down. I think getting a running back at number 12, a little bit better than number 6 in terms of saving on payments and stuff like that. But when you look at, obviously people's reaction was very strong. And I understand because people were listening to pundits talk about positional value. You don't draft a running back early. But when you just simply turn on the tape of Jahmyr Gibbs, and over the past couple of days watching some of the games from Alabama, and you realize that Br0 has spent time there, it's a great, wonderful draft pick, an offensive weapon that is going to help Jared Goff. And I just absolutely am impressed with the Lions being able to target solid offensive weapons and good football players. So I was not surprised, and I'm very impressed that the Lions were willing to do it, because this offense, while it was great last year, can be even better in 2023.
So what do you think how do you think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be used, John? Like what I've heard, we've done this with Alvin Kamara. We've kind of, I saw some tweets going back. They were screenshotting all the different running backs. This could be, and that's really, that's kind of what maybe the Lions are looking for. Could this be our version of Deebo Samuel?
Yeah, everywhere. I think that there's an opportunity, and I know you're going to hear this more often, that maybe running backs are going to be rebranded to be called quote-unquote offensive weapons. And what that means is he's going to line up potentially all over the place. In the slot, going to be used out of the backfield. We'll get screen passes. I think what you see with Jahmyr Gibbs on tape is an individual that on any given play can be a home run threat, has the quality stop-start ability, was able to make plays. And one trait that I think Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell and that offensive coaching staff are looking for in players, willingness to fight through tackles. And last year, when Ben Johnson wrapped up the season, he said that he felt like some of the plays that were called could have been even better in the run game had the running backs just broken a couple more tackles. So when you see David Montgomery in combination with Gibbs, you're going to see yards after contact, fighting through tackles, and just having the ability to do a little bit more, which is going to make that offense so much better. This offense is going to be even more explosive, and it's going to keep defenders on their heels, because once you give them a little Jahmyr Gibbs, then you start pounding them and wear them down with David Montgomery. So it's an upgraded running backs room, and Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a focal point. He's going to be somebody that the Lions target and give the football to. He's going to be utilized early, day one.
Staying on the offensive side of the football, the last pick the Lions made was in the 7th round. It was the second pick, and they went with Antoine Green out of North Carolina. I haven't seen a whole lot of him, but what I do know is you can't teach size, and he has got it. Where do you think that he fits in the wide receiver room for this club?
Yeah, and it's a real interesting when you look at what he brings to the table, size, and he averaged 18 yards per catch with Carolina. And early on, you see obviously a 7th rounder battles is going to have to battle to get on the roster, but I think you'll see special teams value. But where you see him, he's going to have an opportunity to get on the field. And early on, I think that, working with Marvin Jones, working with Josh Reynolds, you'll see him in some packages early in the season. But I think with a player like that, a developmental player, you're going to see somebody that's going to be brought along slowly. But with it's going to be great to see in training camp kind of how early he develops that connection because, like you said, size has the ability to kind of take some of that, with losing DJ Chark, you lose some of that kind of big play capability and Jamison Williams suspension. So hopefully as the season progresses, you get a guy that has the potential to kind of what Jared Goff struggles the most with is kind of that mid-range passing, finding somebody to kind of extend plays and take pressure away from the defensive line. So what you want to do is just basically try to have him be an intermediate threat, in that 15 to 20-yard range, certain opportunities early on. But deep threats, the more deep threats you can have, the better your offense is going to be, but it's going to be brought along slowly.
Speaking of guys brought along slowly, one of the guys I was very interested in because the quarterback position is something that we haven't – we got to have a backup, right? And no offense to Nate Sudfeld, great guy. But at the end of the day, this team has to be able to, add some quality depth there. They have to get maybe a little bit younger, especially on the cap, because most people are going to get younger. Guy's 25, but quarterbacks play longer, so that's okay. And then it'll bring us to the Jared Goff decision and what happens, after this season, because I think a lot of it does hinge on this season. But the selection of Hendon Hooker. I mean, if he doesn't get injured, he's probably, he's in the conversation for the first quarterback off the board. I think right there with Bryce Young. He's a Heisman front runner, 27 touchdowns, only 2 picks when he got hurt. Excuse me, I had to sneeze there. But what about the actual selection of him? I liked it a lot, especially where they picked him at. How do you see the actual pick itself, and then where do you see Hendon Hooker fitting into the Lions moving forward?
Yeah, it's real interesting when you debate what we want as supporters and those following versus what actually happened. Look, Jared Goff, clear-cut QB1. He's the starter. He's the guy that the organization has been building an offensive line around, bringing in offensive weapons. And we all just wanted, and Brad Holmes had said that he didn't do enough in that quarterback's room. So it's been several seasons since the Lions drafted a quarterback, and he came out, Brad Holmes, and said that he needed to do more to fill out that quarterback's room behind Nate Sudfeld. And you add a quarterback that I think you can purely describe as a developmental quarterback. There is no controversy. As much as people want to think that Hendon Hooker is going to battle in year one to take Jared Goff's job, it's not going to happen. Even if Jared Goff goes down, I don't think the Lions are going to throw him to the wolves. They're going to protect him and truly develop a quarterback because you still look at, when you look at film of Hendon Hooker, the offense at Tennessee was kind of more of a single read, quick decision kind of offense. And Ben Johnson is running an offense that is extremely intricate and has so many ways in which the route trees, the way in which the concepts and designs are run, that a quarterback coming in first year is not going to master it that quickly. So if something happens to Jared Goff, you would expect Nate Sudfeld to be the backup QB2. First year, I think that Hendon Hooker is going to be able to learn from Jared Goff, learn from Nate Sudfeld, have no pressure. That's what Brad Holmes said after one of the draft days. He said, look, we don't want Hendon Hooker to have any pressure. He is truly a player that we want to, one, to get healthy, two, to understand the NFL system, the NFL life, and to be able to, at one point in the future, maybe, at this point we can say they want him to be a reliable backup, that if the decision is made, because we still have to see how Jared Goff does in 2023, is he the playoff winning quarterback that everybody is expecting, that in a couple years, if Jared Goff is not the guy, then potentially you give Hendon Hooker his opportunity. But for everybody, pump the brakes. He's not probably going to see the field in 2023.
And I'm perfectly fine with that too, John. I really am. That's why him actually getting injured, it might almost benefit him. I like the fact that he's older. I know that some people are like, oh, he's already 25. I like that. I want my quarterback to be the CEO of the franchise. I want him to be buttoned up. I want him to know, just the presentation of himself and what this organization is going to be about. I think that matters. I think that it's important. And for me, I absolutely love it. Now, let's go to the defensive side of the football here because, obviously Jalen Carter was there when the Lions could have selected at 6 and they decided to trade back. I think that some people see what Philadelphia did. I mean, they got an offensive tackle from Alabama in Tyler Steen. They got Nolan Smith, the outside linebacker from Georgia, to pair with Jalen Carter at picks 31 and picks 9, respectively, there in the first round. I think that sometimes some folks, maybe you look at Houston's draft, C.J. Stroud, then trade right up and get Will Anderson Jr. That was pretty. It's a pretty bold move and at a very hefty cost for next season too, with that first round pick going. So my question is, do you think that because maybe some of the selections here from the Lions weren't necessarily quote unquote brand names? I don't know. I don't want to say that about Jahmyr Gibbs because the guy played at Alabama. Brian Branch played at Alabama. You went Alabama, Iowa, Alabama. I don't know. I just feel like a lot of fans, didn't get the guy that the mock draft said, and so therefore they kind of spiraled out of control on draft day.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up mock drafts real fast. Just for those that hate mock drafts, if you have paid attention to mock drafts throughout the time around January when they start picking up, you would have known about 50% of the players potentially the Lions were targeting. And Hendon Hooker, Brian Branch, Jack Campbell, and Sam Laporta all had been mocked to Detroit. So while it's not going to be perfect in exactly the spot, no one's going to be able to predict exactly trades. Mock drafts will give you clusters of players that the Lions are interested in. 50% you would have been aware of had you followed mock drafts. So they do have some value, but they're not gospel, and that's the way to look at it. But for the Lions, you look at what they're looking for, and a player – I'm glad that Jalen Carter was there at 6 because it gave us a definitive answer. They did the evaluation, and they felt it wasn't a fit. That's what it did. It gave you the answer that, okay, after Jameson Williams' situation, which may have impacted it slightly, but I would say that a guy like Jalen Carter is far too great a risk for what Brad Holmes was willing to do. The Lions are targeting players that are hardworking, all about football, and are dedicated, and when the chips are down, they trust that they can get back up and have no real question. So picking up a Broderick Martin, I know is not going to light the world on fire, but this is an athletic defensive lineman with massive size that just his sheer body type will clog up the middle. Now, he's got things to work on. He's a developmental player. But you guys got to remember, Brad Holmes likes these kind of players that he finds in these all-star games, the East-West Shrine Bowl. And he likes players that, even though they might not have exactly the supreme talent or the 5 stars coming out, that when they get into the Lions system are going to work hard and develop. Just look at the likes of a Kirby Joseph, Malcolm Rodriguez, that with the system in place, this is what benefit for those that are listening, the Lions have with having a good coaching staff, is that when you have a solid coaching staff, you can bring in players into a system and then have them develop if you target the right players. And yes, everybody would have loved the Jalen Carter because his film just jumps off the tape, but sometimes risks far outweigh rewards, and you realize that, okay, let's see how Broderick Martin and what he brings to the table, how he fits into that defensive line. He is going to be a run stopper, but at the same time, sometimes we always have to put on the table that a draft class, you look at fits. Broderick Martin fitting with Jack Campbell definitely improves the run game because Jack Campbell is a monster in the middle, and he's going to be anchoring that defense for the next decade. So you always have to look at it in combination with the other draft picks. And I think when in totality, when we look back on the Detroit Lions, if they go on this run, which is expected over the next 2 to 3 seasons, it's going to be stemming from the 3 draft classes that Brad Holmes put together, who basically deconstructed a roster in 3 years and brought in core players for the next several seasons. So in my opinion, it's a great draft class that has set up the Lions for success. in the playoffs, not only for 1 year, but for the next few years. And that's the way I'm looking at it. And we'll look back on these 3 drafts as a time when Brad Holmes put in a system that was a situation that allowed the Lions to target players to fit their system and to perform on the field.
It sounds like you're overall very happy with the way that the 2023 NFL draft went for the Detroit Lions.
I'm very impressed. I think that when you look at how the Lions are operating, they're targeting players that obviously have a certain psychological trait as well. Hardworking, smart football players and dedicated. Broderick Martin said that he's dedicating his career to his older brother who had passed away. They have motivation. They have strong football IQ, a love of football. When Jack Campbell came to Allen Park, he just really shined in the way in which he spoke to the media. Go back and listen to what he said. He talked about winning. He talked about getting into Detroit and getting to work. And he's not on social media. He's somebody that is dedicated to his craft. And that's what you're seeing in terms of who's being brought to the building. Guys that love football, guys that are willing to grind, that understand what the Lions are about, and the Lions are targeting those type of players. And the proof's in the pudding. When you see an Amon-Ra St. Brown, you see a Kirby Joseph, and you see so many players that now start entering the game. James Houston, I mean, it's no secret that the reason he was able to have success was he wasn't thrown into the fire right away. The coaching staff made a concerted effort to develop him on the practice squad, and then, boom, when the time came and he had his opportunity, he took full advantage of it. 8 sacks, it came out of nowhere, and you'll have that potential when you have, 1, a good group of coaches, and 2, a good system of scouts in place. And the proof's in the pudding. These 3 draft classes have produced a core that I think are going to shine for many years to come. I'm very impressed. And for me, I'm on the side of what Brad Holmes said. I don't worry about positional value. If you find a great running back that can play, add him to the team. I was pining for Bijan Robinson. I loved his tape, but the Lions went in a different direction. But I was not shocked at all they went running back. And if you follow all Lions, you knew that we talked about the potential of the Lions adding 1 offensive player and 1 defensive player in this draft, because that's how it was looking from the inside.
John Maakaron, the Detroit Sports Podcast. Find him on Twitter at Detroit Podcast. Find his work, All Lions Sports Illustrated coverage with our good friend Double L, Logan Lamorandier. John, my friend, as always, partner, thank you so much for your time today. Have a great day and a great rest of the weekend, my man. Thanks again.
You guys, too. Always enjoy talking. Let's talk soon.